My parents tried to cancel my wedding for my sister's second wedding, so I removed their invitations and let them beg at the hotel lobby in shame. I never thought the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally would be the ones to teach me that some bridges are meant to be burned. My name is Natalie Bennett. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how my family's betrayal became the greatest gift they ever gave me. It started on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, reviewing final details for my wedding with my planner, when my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen, and I answered with a smile, expecting her to ask about flower arrangements or seating charts. "Natalie, honey, we need to talk about your wedding date," she said without preamble. Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "What about it, Mom?" "Well, Vanessa just called, and she set her wedding date for the same weekend as yours. You know how these things work. We can't have two weddings in the family so close together. It would split the guest list and make everything awkward." I stared at my wedding planner, who was politely pretending not to listen. Vanessa, my 26-year-old sister, was getting married for the second time. Her first marriage had ended in spectacular fashion when she'd been caught cheating with her personal trainer. The scandal had rocked our social circle, but somehow, she'd managed to land another wealthy man willing to overlook her past. "Mom, my wedding is in 8 weeks. I've been planning this for 8 months. Vanessa just got engaged last month." "I know, sweetheart, but you have to understand, Vanessa's wedding is going to be quite the event. Her fiancé has connections in the entertainment industry, and there might be some celebrities attending. It's important for the family's reputation that we put our best foot forward." My wedding planner raised her eyebrows. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. "And my wedding isn't important for the family's reputation?" "Of course it is, dear, but let's be realistic. David seems like a lovely man, but he's just a financial advisor. Vanessa's marrying someone with real influence, real connections. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good of the family." I hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, I drove to my parents' house in my practical Honda Civic, the same car I'd been driving since college because I'd been too responsible to splurge on something flashier. The house looked exactly the same as it had during my childhood, impressive from the outside. But I knew now how much of that impression was built on credit cards and careful social maneuvering. Dad was in his study, and Mom was arranging flowers in the kitchen. Vanessa was there too, looking radiant as always, her blonde hair perfectly styled and her engagement ring catching the light every time she moved her hand. "Natalie!" she squealed when she saw me. "Mom told me the good news. Isn't this perfect? Now we can coordinate our weddings and maybe even share some vendors. I've already booked the Riverside Ballroom. You know, the one with the crystal chandeliers? Where are you having yours again?" "The Willowbrook Gardens," I said quietly. "You know, the place I've dreamed of getting married since I was 12. The place I've had booked for 8 months. Vanessa's face fell slightly. "Oh, right. Well, I'm sure we can work something out." Mom bustled over with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Girls, let's sit down and figure this out like adults. Natalie, I know you're attached to your date, but Vanessa's situation is a bit more complex." "Complex how?" Dad looked up from his newspaper. "Vanessa's fiancé is Marcus Wellington. His family owns half the newspapers in the state. This wedding could open doors for all of us. And my fiancé is just David Mitchell, financial advisor," I said flatly. "Now don't put words in our mouths," Mom said, but her tone confirmed exactly what I'd suspected. "We love David. He seems very stable. Stable. The kiss of death for excitement in my family. I'm not changing my date," I said. The room went silent. Vanessa's eyes widened. Dad folded his newspaper with sharp, precise movements. "Excuse me?" Mom's voice was dangerously quiet. "I said I'm not changing my date. I've put deposits down, sent save the dates, booked vendors. David's family has made travel arrangements. I'm not disrupting 8 months of planning because Vanessa decided to get married on a whim." "It's not a whim," Vanessa protested. "Marcus wanted a summer wedding, and that's the only weekend the Riverside Ballroom had available. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you chose that date." Dad stood up. "Natalie Elizabeth Bennett, I'm disappointed in you. Since when did you become so selfish?" "Selfish?" The word hit me like a slap. I'm selfish for keeping the wedding date I've had planned for 8 months? "You're selfish for not considering what's best for this family," Mom said. "Vanessa's wedding is going to be a significant social event. The connections we make there could benefit all of us. Your wedding is going to be nice. But let's be honest about what we're working with here. I looked around the room at the three people who were supposed to love me most in the world. Vanessa was examining her manicure. Dad was shaking his head in disappointment. Mom was looking at me like I was a particularly stubborn child who needed to be reasoned with. What exactly are we working with, Mom? Well, honey, David's a nice man, but he's not exactly... He doesn't come from the kind of family that can elevate our social standing. Vanessa's match is much more advantageous for everyone. There it was. The truth I'd been dancing around my entire life. In my family, worth was measured by social status and financial advantage. Vanessa had always been the pretty one, the charming one, the one who dated the right kind of men. I was the responsible one, the one with the steady job, the one who helped out when money was tight, but apparently, not the one whose happiness mattered when it conflicted with social climbing. Fine, I said, standing up. Don't come to my wedding. Natalie? Mom started. No, I mean it. If my wedding is such an inconvenient, unimportant event, then don't bother attending. I'll have my wedding on the date I planned, with the people who actually want to celebrate David and me. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. The next few weeks were a blur of hurt feelings and cold silences. Mom called twice to ask if I'd come to my senses, but I let the calls go to voicemail. Vanessa sent a text saying she hoped we could work something out, but I didn't respond. Dad didn't reach out at all. I threw myself into wedding planning with David's family, who welcomed me with open arms. David's mother, Eleanor, was everything my own mother wasn't. Warm, genuinely interested in my happiness, and excited about every detail of the wedding. His father, Richard, was quiet but kind, always asking how he could help. Are you sure your family can't make it? Eleanor asked one afternoon as we were addressing invitations. It seems so sad to have a wedding without your parents there. I'd told them my family had a scheduling conflict, not wanting to admit the full humiliating truth. They have other commitments, I said. David squeezed my hand. He knew the real story, and he'd been nothing but supportive. Their loss, he said simply. Our wedding is going to be perfect, with or without them. And it was going to be perfect. We'd moved the ceremony to the Ocean View Resort, a stunning venue that David's family had suggested. It was more expensive than what I'd originally planned. But Eleanor had insisted on helping with costs. Consider it our wedding gift, she'd said. Every bride deserves her dream wedding. I should have wondered why David's family seemed so comfortable with five-star luxury, why they had connections that got us impossible reservations and priority bookings. But I was too hurt by my own family's rejection to ask many questions. 3 days before the wedding, I was having my final dress fitting when my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Nat, I've been thinking about everything, and I really think we should talk. Can we meet for coffee? I stared at the message for a long time. The seamstress was pinning my veil, and I looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. I looked happy, radiant even. Despite everything my family had put me through, I was about to marry the man I loved, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. I texted back, I'm busy with wedding preparations. Maybe after I get back from my honeymoon. Her response came immediately. Please, Nat. It's important. I know we haven't handled this well. But I was done being the one who had to handle things. I was done being the understanding sister, the flexible daughter, the one who always accommodated everyone else's needs. I turned off my phone. The morning of my wedding dawned bright and clear. I woke up in the bridal suite at the Ocean View Resort, surrounded by David's sisters and cousins who'd flown in from around the country to be there. They'd stayed up late with me the night before, sharing stories and making me feel like part of a real family. As I was getting my hair done, I heard a commotion in the hallway. Eleanor knocked on the door and slipped inside, looking flustered. Natalie, honey, there are some people here who say they're your family. They don't have invitations, but they're insisting they belong here. My stomach dropped. My family is here? A couple in their 50s and a young blonde woman. They seem quite upset about not being on the guest list. I closed my eyes. Of course they'd come. Now that the wedding was actually happening. Now that they could see what they were missing out on, they wanted to be part of it. Tell them I'll be down in a few minutes, I said. I found them in the resort lobby, looking dramatically out of place in their suddenly too casual clothes. Mom was wearing a department store dress that she'd probably convinced herself was appropriate for a resort wedding. Dad was in a suit I'd seen him wear to church. Vanessa was in something sparkly and attention-grabbing, because of course she was. "Natalie!" Mom rushed over to me. "Sweetheart, you look absolutely stunning. I can't believe you're getting married in a place like this. It's incredible." I looked around the lobby with fresh eyes. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the enormous flower arrangements that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The staff members in their crisp uniforms, moving efficiently between guests who carried themselves with the casual confidence of people accustomed to luxury. "How did you find out where the wedding was?" I asked. "David's mother called yesterday," Dad said. "She said she couldn't bear the thought of a bride getting married without her family there. She's lovely, by the way, very gracious. Eleanor." Of course she would have done that, thinking she was helping heal a family rift. "She explained there had been some kind of misunderstanding," Mom continued, "and she wanted to make sure we felt welcome. She even arranged for rooms for us here at the resort. Can you imagine? This place must cost a fortune per night." I could see them doing the math, looking around at the other wedding guests who were mingling in the lobby. David's relatives and friends, all dressed in expensive clothes, all carrying themselves with the easy confidence of people who belonged in places like this. "Natalie," Vanessa said, stepping forward, "I owe you an apology. We all do." I was so caught up in my own wedding plans that I didn't consider how hurtful we were being. "Your wedding," I said. "How did that go, by the way?" She had the grace to look embarrassed. "It was lovely. Smaller than we'd planned, but lovely. Smaller than planned." I wondered if Marcus Wellington's family had been less impressed with the Bennett name than my parents had hoped. "I'm glad you could make it," I said, and I meant it, not because I'd forgiven them, but because I wanted them to see what they'd almost missed out on, what they'd tried to make me sacrifice. The ceremony was held on the resort's cliff-top garden, overlooking the ocean. As I walked down the aisle, I saw my family in the back row, their eyes wide as they took in the scene. The string quartet, the elaborate floral arrangements, the guest list that read like a who's who of business and politics. David was waiting for me at the altar, looking more handsome than I'd ever seen him. But it wasn't just his appearance, it was the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the world who mattered. Like I was precious. The officiant was a family friend, a federal judge who'd known David since he was a child. As we exchanged vows, I saw my parents whispering to each other, clearly trying to figure out how a simple financial advisor had managed to arrange all this. The reception was even more impressive. The ballroom had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale, with thousands of white roses and twinkling lights. The band was a group I'd heard on the radio, and the wine was older than I was. I watched my family throughout the evening, saw them trying to process what they were seeing. During the cocktail hour, I noticed Dad cornering David's father, Richard, clearly trying to get information about the family business. Mom was doing the same with Eleanor, asking careful questions about their home, their other children, their background. It was during the father-daughter dance that I saw the exact moment everything clicked for them. Richard Mitchell took the microphone and gave a speech about how happy he was to welcome me into the family. He talked about the Mitchell Group, the financial services company that David's great-grandfather had founded in 1952. He mentioned their offices in New York, London, and Tokyo. He talked about David's work in international acquisitions and his Harvard MBA. I saw my parents' faces go white after the dance mom appeared at my elbow. "Natalie, honey, I had no idea David came from such a prominent family. Didn't you?" I asked innocently. "I thought you'd researched him thoroughly before deciding he wasn't good enough for your daughter." "We never said he wasn't good enough. You said he was just a financial advisor. You said he wasn't the kind of man who could elevate our family's social standing." Mom looked around the ballroom, at the senators and CEOs and minor celebrities who were toasting my marriage. "We may have misjudged the situation. You may have." Dad joined us, looking sheepish. "Natalie, I think we need to have a conversation about the misunderstanding we had regarding your wedding date." "What misunderstanding was that, Dad?" "Well, clearly we didn't have all the information. If we'd known about David's family circumstances, we would have handled things very differently." There it was. The confirmation of everything I'd suspected about my family's values, about how they saw me, about what they thought I was worth. "So if you'd known David was wealthy, you would have cared about my happiness?" "That's not what I'm saying," Dad protested, but his face was red with embarrassment. Vanessa appeared, looking uncomfortable. "Nat, I wanted to apologize again for the wedding date thing. I realized now that we were being unfair. What changed your mind, Vanessa? She gestured vaguely around the ballroom. Well, I mean, obviously your wedding is much more significant than we realized. Because David's family has money. That's not... I didn't mean... Yes, you did mean exactly that. You all did. Eleanor Mitchell appeared beside me, radiant in her mother-of-the-groom dress. Natalie, darling, are you introducing me to your family? I'm so sorry we didn't get to meet properly before today. I made the introductions, watching my parents fall over themselves to impress David's mother. Eleanor was gracious and warm, but I could see her taking their measure, understanding exactly what kind of people they were. It's such a shame you couldn't make it to the engagement party last month, Eleanor said politely. Natalie was so disappointed. There had been no engagement party. Eleanor was testing them, and they were failing spectacularly. Oh, we would have loved to be there, Mom said quickly. We had a prior commitment we simply couldn't break. Of course, Eleanor said smoothly. Family obligations can be so complicated, can't they? After Eleanor moved on to speak with other guests, my family huddled around me like vultures. Natalie, Mom said urgently, I think we need to discuss how we can repair our relationship moving forward. Clearly there were some communication issues that led to this unfortunate rift. Communication issues? We want to be part of your life, Dad said. We want to get to know David better, to welcome him properly into the family. Now you do. We always did, Vanessa insisted. We just got caught up in wedding planning stress. You know how crazy things get. I looked at the three of them, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. They weren't evil people, but they were small people. Petty people who measured worth by social status and bank accounts, who had raised me to believe that my value came from what I could do for them rather than who I was. I need to get back to my guests, I said. Of course, Mom said. But Natalie, before you go, we were hoping we could plan a nice dinner next week. Just family, so we can properly celebrate your marriage and start fresh. Start fresh? Put all this wedding date nonsense behind us, Dad said. Focus on building a relationship with David and his family. They seem like lovely people, very connected, very wealthy, very useful. I'll think about it, I said, and walked away. I spent the rest of my reception dancing with my husband, laughing with his family, and accepting congratulations from guests who were genuinely happy for us. I tried not to think about my parents who spent the evening networking with David's relatives and business associates, or Vanessa, who was flirting shamelessly with David's younger brother. It wasn't until we were cutting the cake that I realized what my family's presence actually meant. They weren't there to celebrate me or to apologize for hurting me. They were there to position themselves for whatever advantages my marriage might provide them. During our last dance as the evening wound down, David pulled me close and whispered, "Your family seems intense." I laughed, probably harder than the comment warranted. That's one word for it. Are you okay? I know this whole situation has been hard on you. I looked around the ballroom one more time. At the fairy tale decorations, at the guests who had traveled from around the world to celebrate with us, at my family who were still working the room like it was a business conference. I'm perfect, I said, and meant it. The next morning, as David and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon in the Maldives, my phone rang constantly. Mom, Dad, Vanessa, all of them wanting to continue our conversation from the night before. I let every call go to voicemail. On the plane to our honeymoon, David and I talked about the wedding, about how beautiful everything had been, about how happy we were. We didn't talk about my family's sudden change of heart, but I could see in his eyes that he understood exactly what had happened. You know, he said as we watched the clouds through the airplane window, my family has always been wealthy, but that's not why I fell in love with you. I know, I fell in love with you because you're kind and smart and you make me laugh. Because you work harder than anyone I know and you never ask for credit. Because you see the best in people, even when they don't deserve it. Even when they don't deserve it. Like my family, who had spent 28 years taking my loyalty for granted. I see the best in you, I said. And I see all of you, not your connections, not your family's social status, not what you can do for my career, just you. I started crying then, not from sadness but from relief. Relief that I'd found someone who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Relief that I'd escaped a family dynamic that would have kept me small and grateful for crumbs of affection forever. When we returned from our honeymoon 2 weeks later, there were 17 voicemails from my family waiting for me. Mom wanted to plan a belated reception. Dad wanted to discuss investment opportunities with David. Vanessa wanted to double date with us and some important contacts she'd made at the wedding. I deleted all of them without listening to the end. David and I settled into our new apartment in Manhattan, a wedding gift from his parents. I'd worried about accepting such an expensive gift, but Eleanor had insisted. "We want you to feel at home," she'd said. "Family takes care of family. Family takes care of family," such a simple concept that my own family had never understood. 3 months after the wedding, my parents showed up at our apartment unannounced. The doorman called up to ask if we wanted to see them, and I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. They stood in our living room looking uncomfortable and out of place, taking in the original artwork and designer furniture that came with generational wealth. "Natalie," Mom said, "we've been trying to reach you for months. I've been busy." "With what? You quit your job after the wedding. What have you been doing with your time?" I had quit my job, but not to become a pampered housewife. David and I were starting a foundation focused on educational opportunities for underprivileged children. I was finally doing work that mattered, work that made a difference. "I'm working on some projects," I said vaguely. "Well, we were hoping we could discuss some projects too," Dad said. "I've been thinking about expanding my consulting business, and I was wondering if David might be interested in investing, or if he has contacts who might be looking for investment opportunities," Mom added. "We've always been a family that supports each other's endeavors. Always been a family that supports each other." I almost laughed. "Is that what we've always been?" I asked. "Of course," Vanessa said. She'd been quiet until now, but I could see her taking inventory of everything in the apartment, probably calculating its value. "Family is everything." "Family is everything," I repeated. "That's interesting, because 3 months ago, family was willing to sacrifice my happiness for social advancement. Family was willing to dismiss my marriage as unimportant because they didn't think my husband was impressive enough." "We've apologized for that," Mom said quickly. "We made a mistake. You made a calculation. And now you're making another one." Dad stepped forward. "Natalie, I understand you're still hurt, but at some point, you need to let go of this resentment and think about the future. We're family. We should be working together." "Working together to do what, Dad?" "To build something. To create opportunities. David's family has connections that could benefit all of us. There's no reason we can't all prosper together." There it was. The real reason for their visit, for their months of phone calls and apologies. They wanted access to David's family, to their money and connections and social network. They wanted to use my marriage as a ladder to climb higher than they'd ever been able to climb on their own. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" Mom looked shocked. "Get out of my apartment. Get out of my life. I'm done." "Natalie, you're being dramatic," Vanessa said. "We're trying to make amends here." "No, you're trying to use me. Just like you've always used me. The only difference is that now you think I'm useful." "That's not fair," Dad protested. "We love you. You love what I can do for you. You love the connections I can provide. You love the social status my marriage gives you. But you don't love me. You proved that when you were willing to sacrifice my wedding, my happiness, my feelings, for Vanessa's social climbing." "We made a mistake," Mom started. "You made a choice. You chose to prioritize Vanessa's second wedding over my first and only wedding. You chose to cut me off financially and emotionally when I wouldn't comply with your demands. You chose to dismiss my marriage as unimportant. Those weren't mistakes. They were deliberate decisions that showed me exactly how much I matter to you. But we're here now," Vanessa said. "We're trying to fix things. You're here now because you found out David's family has money. If he'd turned out to be the simple financial advisor you thought he was, would you be here? Would you have called 17 times? Would you be asking for investment opportunities and connections?" Their silence was answer enough. "I spent 28 years trying to earn your love and approval," I continued. 28 years being the responsible daughter, the one who helped out when money was tight, the one who never asked for anything in return. And the first time I needed you to choose me, to support me, to prioritize my happiness, you couldn't do it." "Families make sacrifices," Dad began. "Yes, they do. And I was always the one making them. I was the one who gave up spring break trips to help with expenses. I was the one who chose a state school instead of my dream college to save money. I was the one who moved back home after graduation to help pay bills. I was always the one sacrificing for the family. But when I asked you to sacrifice something small for me, just to prioritize my wedding over Vanessa's social climbing, you couldn't do it. I walked to the door and opened it. I don't need your love anymore. I don't need your approval. I don't need anything from you. I have a family now, people who chose me, who value me, who support me without conditions or calculations. Natalie, please, Mom said, tears in her eyes. Don't do this. Don't throw away your family over a misunderstanding. I'm not throwing you away. You threw me away the moment you decided I wasn't worth as much as Vanessa's social advancement. I'm just finally accepting what you showed me. They left, but not before Dad made one last attempt. You'll regret this, Natalie. Family is all you have in the end. When David's family gets tired of you, when the novelty wears off, we'll still be here. No, I said. You'll still be there. I'll be here, with people who actually love me. After they left, I sat in my beautiful apartment and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn love or prove my worth or manage other people's expectations. I was just existing, just being myself, just living my life. David came home an hour later and found me curled up on the couch with a cup of tea, looking out at the city skyline. How did it go? He asked gently. It went exactly how I expected it to go. He sat down beside me and pulled me close. Are you okay? I'm perfect, I said, and realized it was true. 6 months later, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. Vanessa was getting divorced and remarrying again, this time to a tech entrepreneur she'd met at my wedding reception. The invitation was elaborate and expensive, with gold foil and silk ribbons. I threw it away without opening the RSVP card. A year after that, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was Mom, crying. Natalie, I need to talk to you. Your father had a heart attack. He's in the hospital. For a moment, I felt the old familiar pull, the ingrained response to drop everything and rush to help, but then I remembered who I was now, what I'd learned about my worth, what I'd built for myself. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. I hope he recovers. That's it? That's all you're going to say? What would you like me to say, Mom? I'd like you to come home. I'd like you to be here for your family when we need you. Like you were there for me when I needed you? The line went quiet. That's different, she said finally. No, it's not. It's exactly the same. It's family choosing whether to show up for each other when it matters. I hung up and turned off my phone. Dad recovered. I found out through mutual acquaintances, not because anyone in my family told me. I was glad he was okay, but I didn't reach out. I'd learned the difference between caring about someone and allowing them to use your care against you 2 years after my wedding, David. And I bought a house in Connecticut with a garden where I could grow flowers and an office where I could work on the foundation. We hosted dinner parties for friends who celebrated our successes and supported us through challenges. We traveled, we laughed, we built a life that was entirely our own. Sometimes I thought about my family. I wondered if they'd learned anything from losing me, if they'd changed how they treated each other, if they ever reflected on their choices. But mostly, I didn't wonder. I was too busy living a life filled with people who had chosen to love me without conditions. The foundation took off beyond our wildest dreams. We provided scholarships for kids who reminded me of myself, smart, hardworking children from families who couldn't or wouldn't support their dreams. Every graduation ceremony, every acceptance letter, every success story reminded me that worth isn't determined by family approval or social status. It's determined by what you do with the opportunities you create for yourself. 3 years after my wedding, I ran into Vanessa at a charity gala in the city. She was there with husband number 3, looking as beautiful as ever but somehow smaller than I remembered. Natalie, she said, rushing over to me. I can't believe it's you. You look amazing, thank you. You look well too. I've missed you so much. We all have. Mom talks about you constantly. Does she? She keeps saying she doesn't understand how everything went so wrong between us. She really wants to fix things. I looked at Vanessa, really looked at her. She was still beautiful, still charming, but there was something desperate in her eyes, something that suggested her third marriage wasn't going any better than her first 2. Some things can't be fixed, Vanessa. Some things can only be accepted and moved on from. But we're family, she said, and for the first time I heard uncertainty in her voice. You're my biological relatives, I corrected. Family is something different. I don't understand the difference. I know you don't. That's part of the problem. David appeared at my elbow, as if sensing I needed support. Ready to go, sweetheart? Yes, I said, taking his arm. I'm ready. As we walked away, I heard Vanessa call after me. Natalie, wait, can we talk more? Can I call you? I didn't turn around. In the car, David asked if I was okay. I'm great, I said, and I meant it. Do you ever regret it? Cutting them off? I thought about it honestly. I regret that they couldn't love me the way I deserved to be loved. I regret that they missed out on knowing the person I became. But I don't regret protecting myself from people who saw me as a resource instead of a daughter. Even when they're family, especially when they're family. Those are the people who can hurt you the most because you trust them the most. Learning to walk away from toxic family members isn't cruel. It's self-preservation. And now? Now I have a family that chose me, and I chose them back. Now I have people in my life who celebrate my successes instead of trying to profit from them. Now I know the difference between conditional love and unconditional love, and I'll never settle for less than I deserve again. We drove home to our house with the garden and the dinner parties, and the life we'd built together. As we pulled into our driveway, I thought about the scared, desperate young woman who'd called her family from the coffee shop 3 years ago, begging them to understand why her wedding mattered. That woman had thought she needed their approval to be happy. She'd thought family meant owing your dreams to other people's expectations. She'd thought love meant sacrifice without reciprocation. She'd been wrong about all of it. Sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is teaching you that you don't need them to be whole. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is learning that your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions, even when those people share your DNA. I never got a call when Vanessa's third marriage ended, but I heard about it through mutual friends. I never got invited to family holidays or birthday parties or graduations. I never got apologies that weren't attached to requests for favors, and I never missed any of it because I'd learned something my family never had. Real love doesn't come with conditions, and real family doesn't make you choose between their approval and your happiness. I chose my happiness, and in doing so, I found everything I'd been looking for all along.